From CRI Simple Numbers, this is Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, a podcast for those championing market growth and anchoring the nation's economy, small businesses, and entrepreneurs.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Simple Numbers Profitability Playbook Podcast. I'm Mike Maxon, that's Brandon Gray. And
Hey.
Brandon, you ready for another week?
Ready to roll.
Yeah, well, we had a big event last week, our Simple Numbers Mastermind group. So got some takeaways from that. I mean, I know, Brandon, we're going to talk about some other stuff today, but anything off the top of mind you want to give a comment on before that?
Say if there was a theme, perhaps, and we'll dive into this in a future episode just to kind of, because I think the challenges that the group is facing are very similar to what everybody else is facing and what have you there. But if there was a theme, it was around, okay, in a marketplace to where the market is not growing, how do I grow my company? There was a lot of talk about that, and well, I'll save the rest for later. But there were a few nuggets that we kind of came across.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, and what's funny about that theme is it's real popular with what we're dealing with on with a lot of our clients.
Oh, no doubt.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's been I think the $1 million question across the board. And again, some industries notwithstanding, I think that's been like sort of just a theme. I felt like the last 2 years plus.
Yeah, and I would say too, there's a shift that has taken place in the market, and it takes a little while for that shift to kind of filter all the way through to where there still is. There's some markets that are still growing, but over the last 2 years, you've seen that number of markets continually decline to where there's just a handful that are growing. And in order to grow your business, if you're not in one of those, you've got to have a way to steal market share, to come up with a new offering, to expand geographically, to acquire. I mean, there's a lot of different things there. So we'll dive into those.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, real quick, Brandon, this mic that I'm using, I had someone email me. I won't say who because they listen to this regularly, but I got to give them a shout out. And they said, hey, mic sounds good, but make sure you keep your mouth real close to it, like you're going to French kiss it. That's the emails we get from our fans, everybody.
There we go. Hey, it was good advice.
Yeah. Well, hey, so sort of the next couple episodes, we're gonna make it a little fun. Me and Brandon always talk football. We like sports. And so we're gonna talk about running some plays. And so basically I'm just gonna throw some scenarios. And so in football, there's offense and defense. So we're going to start off with defense because we get a lot of calls about people playing defense financially in their company. And so I'm going to just throw different scenarios at Brandon, and he's going to answer them for me. He's so much smarter. So I'm going to lay the answers at his feet. And then next week we'll do some offense. And so, Brandon, you're just going to have to rapid fire these, man. I'm going to
right.
Several of them, and we'll elaborate.
We haven't rehearsed this, so I don't know what's coming my way here. So we'll see how good of a defensive coordinator I am.
Yeah, there you go. So, you're Brandon Gray Inc. And the defense or the attack on your team that you need to play defense on is you have declining revenue. And I know this might sound easy, everyone, but it all starts at the top with sales, and people immediately get into a panic sometimes of declining revenue, but there are plays you can run. And so, Brandon, you're a team and your revenue is declining. How are you defending against that?
Well, the first thing is I want to figure out why. Where's the problem at? Because that's an outcome number. So I want to start to look at a handful of metrics that would maybe give me a little bit more insight. So starting at the top of the funnel, is it lead flow? Are leads down? If so, then I start attacking why that would be the case. Did I change something on the marketing front? Have my competitors changed something? Why would lead flow be down? The next thing I want to look at are conversions. Has my sales team changed? Do I have new people on my sales team? Has the market shifted? Maybe people are interested, but they're not willing to move forward necessarily in the same manner that they had in the past. And so If that's the case, I look at my offering and is it what's the top objection that my sales team is getting, and how do I make sure that we are handling that objection appropriately? So I'll give you an example. It, a lot of times in the current marketplace, people are hesitant to sign a long-term contract. So if I'm, hey, to work with us, you got to sign a 12-month contract. Do I need to change that? I need to move and say, okay, can we do something for the first 3 months or so to get my foot in the door? And then, most clients we work with, once somebody starts working with them, they're hooked. They're like, all right, these folks do a really good job. If it's on the product side of the house, and this could apply for the services as well, is the objection price. Well, am I communicating value correctly? And we talked, it's probably been 6 or so months ago about value proposition. Have I revisited that? So the next thing, maybe also looking at my days to close. How long is it taking? Because if my pipeline looks really good, my conversions are okay, but I'm not getting as much through, I want to look and see how long is it taking, and if it is taking longer than normal, why that is the case. And it could be seasonal. Might have been in the summertime, it was taking longer, people are out of town and what have you. But most likely there are other reasons that drive that. So once I get the data around what's happening, then I can determine, all right, what play do I need to run? And it could be, hey, I don't take this as to let myself off the hook necessarily, but it could be everyone I talk to, all of my friendly competitors, they're down 20%. I'm down 5%. So I'm not saying I accept the 5%, but it tells me the market has shifted and changed. And so in playing defense with looking at that, first understand the why, and then I got to put an offensive strategy in place to counteract that, because that margin's going down, or top line as we're talking right now. It's really hard in the inflationary environment we're in to generate profit.
So let's just say that you got to defend against, and I think this is what I hear more lately than anything, is that, hey, there's been a little bit of a market shift. There's, the inflation, the rates, the tariffs, all these things that are happening, and sales are just tough to come by. So revenue is declining. What plays are you running from there?
So if sales are tough to come by, there's fewer of them. And I understand the frustration or just the lack of budget in some cases. Then I'm looking at the offerings that I have and what would the market be more receptive to. So not a big fan of lowering prices. That's a difficult game to go and play. However, I could look and say I've got an offering that would cost $20,000. Can I have an offering that would be at 12 or at 15? I'm going to provide less services. I'm going to do less work. If it's in the product world, I may scale the product back if I have the ability to do so, or have an alternative product that the market's more receptive to. But I'm going to look and see where the market is at and what are they willing to spend. Now, the trick with that is, if you change the deliverable, you've got to change the inputs. And that's where most folks struggle, especially in the service world. They want to continue to give top shelf service, the whole enchilada, and they're only going to charge 70% of it. That doesn't work too well. So if I scale back, I got to make sure my team's on board with that as to what we're delivering. And that's not, once again, this is kind of blanket advice. That doesn't mean everybody who's seeing this go do that necessarily. There could be other things at play, but you got to, if they're not buying $20,000 products and services, but they'll buy 12, I got to find a way, at least temporarily, to keep the wheels turning.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. Good stuff. I mean, obviously there's a myriad of things we can handle and scenarios we can throw out, but we're just making some general assumptions of what people might be feeling out there and some options for that. All right, here's another one. And I think this is regardless of whether sales are increasing or decreasing. So let's just set that as the parameter. I'm losing gross margin. And that is obviously one where a lot of people miss. And when I say miss, I'm talking like it's a slow bleed over time. And in my experience, I've never seen anyone all of a sudden like fall off the shelf on gross margin. It's like building up. And so, Here's the next thing you got to play defense against. My gross margin's declining. What say you?
So once again, like with sales, you gotta look at the why. So for everyone listening, we might have some new folks listening. We define gross margin as revenue less your non-labor direct cost. So we're not going to talk labor in this conversation. It's everything else. And in some cases, you don't have non-labor direct cost if you're like just purely a services offering business. But for everyone else out there, you're going to have the cost of the material or subcontractors, things like that, that would go into it. First thing I'm going to look at is what has changed with those costs. So it's very likely whenever you see a declining gross margin that the input cost has went up and I have not reflected that in my pricing. So if that's the case, I got to look at my pricing, where things at and relevant to the marketplace. Secondly, I want to look and see, okay, has there been a change in the mix of services or products that I'm offering? Because not every service or product has the same gross margin signature. So I need to dive into the data and see, okay, hey, I was 80% of my margin was coming from this service or product, and now 60% of it is. And the delta is coming from something at a lower margin. Okay, well, why is that the case? What do I potentially need to change in that situation? Kind of drilling down at a much more granular level. And that also helps too, is you got to potentially look at price. Right now, generally speaking, it's really difficult to do an across the board, we're just going to increase prices by X%. You've got to get a little bit more strategic and kind of go, all right, this offering, this product, whatever it may be, is the one that I got to tweak just a little bit there. As far as that part goes.
Do you ever think people need to take into consideration, I've had this happen before where they've maybe have been at a certain gross margin level. Let's say they're getting 80% gross margin. Well, next thing you know, their gross margin is decreasing. They are getting more gross margin dollars, but it's only because maybe one of their products or services that has a lower gross margin signature is actually beginning to take the hold. The markets loved it. It's like, well, hey, your higher margin stuff sort of fallen off, but your lower margin stuff has actually picked up steam. What might you say in those instances to those companies?
Generally speaking, I can't spend a percentage. And so I'm going to look at what do I have to do to generate more dollars of, whether it's volume or what have you, if that's what the market is receptive to. Now, one word of caution there, if that starts to alter my overhead structure, then I might potentially run into issues. And I also need to look at the impact it's going to have on my trade capital as I start to do that, because, depending upon, there could be a lot of variables here, but, if those lower margin services, if I'm not getting the same terms, either in payment terms or in what I have to pay the vendor, that's going to shift my trade capital. So, now I'm out more money. I got to have more capital. So that's a little aside that you want to look at, because you might just go down the path of more gross margin dollars is always better. Well, it may be, but I got to be prepared for the consequence of that on the other side.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Now, here's the thing we're going to shift to next. And before I get into any labor stuff, obviously things in the margin, your cost of goods sold, there are things there that prices go up. So let's just take all expenses as a whole. And I think we've all felt this. Our 100 company model, our clients, man, costs keep rising, man. I'm up against struggling revenue. My margins I'm fighting to maintain, but costs are going up across the board. And this is not labor, so don't think of labor. So you got to play defense now on an inflationary environment. Costs are going up. You still got to run this business. You still got to maintain a profit. What are you doing where costs across the board, that includes anything cost of goods sold, anything in your OpEx? How are you playing defense against that?
Well, let's make the assumption that I can't change pricing, because the easy button is to change pricing. But that's in the current marketplace, that's easier said than done. So the first thing I'm going to look at is, what am I spending by vendor? Now, let me preface all this by saying you're not going to reduce office supplies to the point where it changes the profit signature of your business. So keep that in mind. There are limitations here. This is one that there's usually not a tremendous amount of flexibility. But I'm going to look at first off cost by vendor, especially if it's a direct cost. Those can be higher. I need to have a conversation. Are there alternative vendors that I can use? Have have my existing vendors maybe become a little content with the relationship, and you need to kind of go to them and say, hey guys, I buy a lot from you. We need each other. We're challenged here. What can you do to help as far as those parts go? And a lot of times you'll find it may not be massive, but there could be a point or two of change there that potentially could kind of filter through. As you get to the overhead side, the ability to have impact becomes less. Now, I think we mentioned this on the podcast where we talked about the below 10 million and above 10 million revenue companies and the difference. One thing that jumps out in our 100 company model has been the rate of inflationary cost increases in the facilities bucket. And in particular, it's not necessarily your lease is going up, but it's the cost of things like vehicles, vehicle insurance, repairs and maintenance, software subscriptions, software platforms, seat licenses. All those things are up pretty substantially. And so I look around and kind of go, all right, let's do a little bit of an audit. How many how many service vehicles do we have that we may not be needing or using, that I'm carrying insurance on, putting repairs and maintenance into? Another one could be, softwares. We got 30 licenses and we're using 10 of them. Or this was a software package me as the entrepreneur really loved and thought it was great because I went to a conference, and so we went out and bought it and we hadn't used it since. I know no one's ever done that. So there might be a couple $1,000 a month that you can kind of shave. Once again, it helps a little, but it's not a huge lift.
All right. Great answer. All right. So the last one here, I'm going to set the stage for this one because I'm going to go into the assumption that, hey, if labor is unproductive, we're going through a bad time, you might have to let go of unproductive labor. I'm also going to go through the scenario where, hey, things are declining, we have too much labor, we would have to let it go. Those are the ones where you sort of are, hey, we do have too much. But then there comes a point in any scenario where there's a downturn in revenue margin, your costs are going up, where we get to a point where the labor is kind of like, hey, I don't know if I can adjust down anymore. Right? Like, I mean, eventually you have to serve a customer. Someone does have to go out and sell. Someone does have to answer the phone. And it just can't be down to two people and we're going to hold it here. So let's set the stage that you got to play defense, understanding that, hey, things are tough, whether it's declining margin, declining revenue. I got to keep a staff because what if it's able to turn back around? I can't go so low. So how are you handling the labor? What are you looking at doing? What are some plays that you can run defensively in an environment where, hey, sales are down, margin's struggling, my costs are going up? How do I make this work as I truck through this and then ultimately can serve the customer should it turn back around?
So there is a minimum amount of labor. Now I always, when we start talking to the client, I always challenge them to make sure that their view of minimum amount of labor is truly a minimum amount of labor, because sometimes we think it is, but it isn't really. If you really had to make difficult decisions as far as that part is concerned. So, if that's the case, and there are no other options. I can't play defense any longer. It's kind of like I'm down 7 points or 6 points with a minute to go and I have the ball. I got to play offense in that case. I've got to find a way to get the gross margin dollars up because I have no other options if that's the case. Now, rarely is that the case. Every now and then it happens, but rarely is it. A lot of times what we find is what Mike was saying earlier about, I believe I'm at minimum labor because if the market comes back and I change anything now, I'm not going to have the resources to respond. So, first thing, hope is not a strategy. You've heard us say that. And I kind of added to that last year, especially. Buying hope is getting really expensive. So in those situations, I've got to first look at how much capital do I have or that I'm willing to risk in order to buy time and wait and see does the market improve. That's the first thing. Because if I have some capital, then I can play the game longer. I can say, but I do suggest in those cases, you go ahead and say, hey, whether it's 50K, 100K, whatever it may be, that is the only amount I'm willing to risk to buy another 2, 3, 4 months to see does the market start to move back. Also, in making that decision, I have to have some information to tell me that the market is on the brink of coming back, whether that's, hey, I've got all these proposals out here about to close, or we're starting to see the seasonal uptick in the retail sector, or whatever it may be. I got to have some data out there other than just, I think it's going to get better in 2 or 3 months. What data tells me that it's going to start to get better? And so, once I've designated that as I'm going through that burn of capital till I, hopefully see if the market comes back, I'm looking to flex as much as possible. So this is kind of once again, we've made the assumption we've already let the C and D players go. We're down to the only folks that you'd want in a foxhole with you, and the folks that we believe would be critical to grow us back. I'm going to flex. So that's the first move, meaning, especially with direct labor, we might have some weeks that work 32 hours, that work 24 hours, whatever it may be, to get, just a little bit off. Some clients call that shared sacrifice. I'm also going to take a really long, hard look at that admin management labor structure, because that's typically the one, whenever most folks are saying, I need people to bounce back, that people are trying to hold on to. And I may have to flex some of that. I may have to move some of those folks, if their salary over to hourly, do some reductions there, from a temporary standpoint. And then the last exercise is I basically look at and say, okay, given where we're at today, if I was starting this business or if I just acquired this business, here's the positions I have to have. Here's the people I have. Who moves over? And I can't move everybody over. I've got to operate within that salary cap of minimum profitability. And yeah, it sucks. It's kind of like, yeah, that salesperson who I need to have around if demand comes back, because we just can't get to all the leads if it comes back. But right now they're not that busy. I got to let them go. Sometimes it's it's a senior management position to where I can't tell you the times to where companies have grown and they go, hey, I'm hiring a VP of ops. We lose 3 or 4 large accounts. Market's not responding. It stings, because I promise you, it took you a long time to find that person. And the thought of having to get somebody else in there and retrain them and get them up to speed, because you as the entrepreneur are going to have to fill the gaps. So that's not, that doesn't sound too fun, but it's literally life or death. And so I've got to make some of those difficult decisions that, sure, I may not can grow back from very quickly, but if I don't make them, I'm not going to be around to grow back.
Awesome. Well, hey man, good job playing defense.
Oh, thanks.
I feel like you've done this before.
Now I know in the current market we have several calls where we're talking about playing defense. So I'd much rather talk about playing offense. Playing defense isn't always a lot of fun there, but it's a necessary part of business. And so, like I said, biggest kind of, I think the keys there, you got to dig into the data to understand why is the case. Avoid making assumptions. Then got to look at what my capital position is, because that tells me how much time I have. If I don't have much time, then I've got to speed up some of these decisions. And I think that's the biggest one that I see people miss. It's just kind of like, well, I'm going to keep playing the game, keep trying to play the game. But, when we work with clients, and we got this from another client, in full disclosure. So this client was actually doing really well at the time. They would come to their finance meeting with a close the door date. So they worked with contracts. So they look at all their current contracts, what that would bring in margin. They looked at all their overhead costs, their burn rate, and they would go, hey, if we do not sell another thing, right now it's the 22nd of September, March 3rd, 2026, we close the doors. And that brings a lot of urgency whenever you look at it that way. I mean, it was kind of like, yeah, the company's doing really well, but if we don't get something in place March 3rd, we got to close the doors because we're out of cash. So having that line of sight really kind of helps.
Yeah. Well played. Excellent job. Well, cool. Well, so next week, we'll go on a little offense.
Just play offense
and talk some things. We'll talk. Yeah, we do. We get to play offense when things are going well. How do we handle it? Now, I will say this, everybody, you might surprise you some of these answers. Some people that stuff starts going up, and some people want to go guns a-blazing. We'll see if Brandon wants to run those plays. But anyways, for Brandon, unless you got anything else, I think it's time we sign off.
Yeah, just a reminder, we talked the last couple episodes about our mailing list to receive emails from us. You can go to simplenumberscri.com, sign up for that mailing list. We're sending things out in that, whether it's just general, good to know information. We're working on some year-end things that we're putting together because October's right here, man. We're about to be in Q4, so we get pretty busy toward the end of the year in Q4 with sessions and folks wanting to plan out the next year. So we'll be sending some stuff out about that. So yeah, sign up for it.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For Brandon, I'm Mike, and we will catch y'all next week.
See y'all.
If you want to know more about driving sustainable profitability for your business or are interested in learning more about CRI Simple Numbers, please visit our website at simplenumberscri.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast. You can subscribe to Profitability Playbook on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a review. This podcast is brought to you by CRI Simple Numbers LLC, a division of CRI Capital Group LLC, and a subsidiary of CRI Advisors LLC. CRI is the trusted brand under which Carr, Riggs & Ingram LLC, the CPA firm, and CRI Advisors LLC, along with its subsidiaries, deliver professional services. Please note, Carr, Riggs & Ingram LLC is a licensed independent CPA firm offering attest services, whereas CRI Advisors LLC and its subsidiaries specialize in providing tax and business consulting services. These entities operate within an alternative practice structure as defined by the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct and comply fully with applicable laws, regulations, and professional standards. Ready to simplify your business finances and drive growth? Explore valuable resources, books, and tools designed for entrepreneurs and small businesses at simplenumberscri.com.